Now then, Reefers, welcome to episode 1 of An Audience With, presented by Coral Freaks. In this episode today, we are joined by Tony Vargas and Jamie Craggs, who are going to be giving their talks at the Coral Freaks event. There will be 3 episodes from the Coral Freaks event. Episode 1, which is today's episode. Episode 2, which will feature Pat and Trina from Reef Wholesale in Canada, and Thein from Tidal Gardens. And episode 3, which is the live Q&A from the audience. So stay tuned for those episodes. Without further ado, here is episode 1 of An Audience With Jamie Craggs and Tony Vargas.
Okay, welcome to Coral Freaks 2024, everyone. I'm Jeremy Gay. I'm the senior editor at Reef Builders, and I'm your host for today's show. Paul Hughes told me he wanted today to go like the Jonathan Ross show, so I guess that makes me Jonathan Ross and our special guest, the stars of Reefing Stage and Screen. I'm up here today with Connor Hughes, giving me technical and timing support, and as many of you know, Advanced Aquarium Consultancy is definitely a family affair, with all 4 of the Hughes family working as integral parts of the business. To start off the show, I'd just like to mention those who have helped to make it happen. Coral Freaks has been helped out by our sponsors Aperture Pet and Life, who are represented in the UK by Exodus, who distribute Ecotech Marine and Neptune Systems, and D&D, the aquarium solution, who distribute Aqua Illuminations. It's a collaboration with Love to Reef, and the event will make a charitable donation of each of the ticket sales to the mental health charity Mind. Paul Hughes would like to say a few words.
Morning. Thank you very much for coming. I do hope you have a wonderful, relaxed day full of reefing goodness supplied by our fantastic guests, shared with this diverse community of coral freaks all around and in front of you. Social reef meets like this intimate little show, I believe, gives so much more than online-only interaction with your reefing pals. It's good to meet face to face, I'm sure you would all agree. Coral Freaks 2019 was the first small experimental USA vendor light show in the UK. Now I hope to sow a new seed with a reefing audience with. Anyone can do it. I truly believe reefing events like this and Love to Reef can help the soul and unite friendships often willing to share not only their reefing journeys with you, but very often way more. I believe reef meets are needed more than ever, especially since COVID-19, whereby folk like ourselves got out the habit of going places and getting excited about the hobby. Today is really just about that, enjoying one another's company, light-hearted entertainment, listening to other serious full-time coral freaks who made this hobby their lifetime's work. So from serious YouTubing, farming, wholesaling, retailing, spawning, lighting and writing, sit back and enjoy listening to our wonderful guests who have travelled far and wide to be with you. We are truly blessed to have such great quality guests here in the UK. Later, please join in with a question and answer session. That's your moment, the hobbyist moment to ask questions to the panel. So do please stay for the duration and join in. Now we're on a really tight schedule today, so I'll pass you over to Paul Longhurst of Love to Reef to explain a little bit more about the important bit, Mind, the mental health charity. Jeremy will then take the spotlight and get this show going. Enjoy, people.
Good morning. I'm Paul Longhurst. I help to run Love to Reef. And first of all, thank you very much for being here, because you've made a big difference already. By buying a ticket, £5 of every ticket goes towards the mental health charity Mind. And if you haven't picked up your raffle tickets, then there's plenty of opportunity, because 100% of that goes towards the charity. So I thank you in advance for the contribution there. But why Mind? And we kind of fell into it. So as a lot of the faces here have been to Love to Reef, and we started 3 years ago, and it's a non-profit event, so all the money we make goes towards that a charity. And I was thinking, what charity we go to? And Jay's Real Reef UK, who's here today, mentioned about Mind. And that first event with 50 people, I was kind of blown away. So the number of people in that room that came up to me and said, thank you, not just for the event, but how reefing helped them, whether it get them from a dark place, whether it supports them or whether it's their happy place. Not sure how that's a happy place when you're looking at your tank and you've got dinos and you've got algae and things like that. But I think it's an escape nevertheless. And then as the events have gone on, whether it be 100 people or 200 people, more and more people have spoken really around how reefing helps them, but also the connection with being local, with their LFS and events. And as Paul's alluded to already, these events face-to-face are really important for people just to get to know other people, to make connections that they can have for years. And I've been in the hobby only 10 years, but the connections I've made certainly the last 4 or 5 years have been absolutely fantastic and helped me not just in reefing, but also to take me away from work and other things of that nature. So it really is, I think, a happy place. Now, so far we've raised about £6,500 for Mind, and that's gone to Central Mind. And as you came in, you might have noticed a lady called Jenna. She's from the local branch from Essex. And what we're going to do, myself and Paul, we're going to team up with her and say, okay, how can we help people around Harlow and Essex and take it to that kind of local level, and team up between AAC and also the, from locals that maybe need some help at that moment in time. So thank you very much. Enjoy your day, and you do make a big difference. So thank you, and I hand you back to Jen.
Now to our special guest lineup, and some of whom have come to the UK for the first time. First and foremost, Dr. Jamie Craggs from the Horniman Museum in London and the Coral Spawning Lab. Jamie is a coral spawning pioneer and our greatest British reefing export. Please welcome Jamie. Come to the stage. Thanks for coming, Jamie.
Thank you.
I'm going to sit you just there if that's okay. Next, we've got... we're very pleased to bring you Thein of Tidal Gardens, who's flown over from Ohio in the US. Thein, this is great to have you here. Thanks for coming. Take your seat, Thein. You are at the end there. And next we have, this is Tony Vargas. Tony Vargas was the first American to successfully grow Acropora and runs a reefing store in Qatar. He's the author of 2 amazing books. Come on, Tony. Tony can run this show on his own, so if I get stuck, Tony's taking the lead. And last but certainly not least, we've got a duo, a double act. We've got Patrick Foster and Trina Parsons, who own and run a wholesaler, Reef Wholesale in Canada. And thanks for coming. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Trina. Take your seats. So this is our A team. This is the guys that, with Paul's help, we've assembled to quiz and find out more about them. And hopefully we can learn a lot from you guys as well. Starting with Tony.
Oh my God.
First and foremost.
I don't think everybody out there wants to listen to me first. Do you? Say yes or no. Yes?
Yeah.
There we go. Come on, baby.
Yeah, we've got this all day. So,
okay, let's go.
Tony, when did you first start in reef keeping and fish keeping in general?
Oh my God. Well, it really started with my mother. It started with my mother giving me a fish tank at the age of 6. That was the best day of my life. And then it progressed from there. Everything got better. But whenever I think about my mother in the tank, I'm done. So it started at the age of 6, and then I kept doing it and breeding freshwater fish until the mid-'80s when I saw a copper band butterfly. And I knew I was hooked. And we started going from the copper band butterfly to the powder blue. Back in the late 80s, we're talking about under gravel filter. And then I progressed into the super late 80s into keeping stony corals and soft corals. And the first article that I ever wrote was in 1992, 93 on Acroporas. And it was the first article written in a national publication on Acroporas.
I think we got an image of that. Can we pull that up?
That one?
Yeah, so tell us about this then, Tony. This is 93, was it?
No, that's okay. So it was published in 95, but back then, because of the technology, it took almost a year for it to get published.
And that's the acro featured there.
Yes.
A nice pastel coloured. What species was that? Do you know?
I think it was Bavita.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us about this then, because if you're the first person to keep acros in the US.
No, I wasn't the first.
Okay.
I was among some of the first that were keeping acro.
Yeah.
So I wasn't the first.
Well, that's what I kind of associate you with. There was kind of a rat pack of kind of early American pioneers who I certainly grew up reading the articles, and there was you and some other really well-known names. And
Yes.
and you were all part of a society, were you? Or
Yeah, they used to call us the Reef Mafia.
Reef Mafia, yeah.
The Northeast Reef Mafia.
And you're from the Bronx, yeah?
And I'm from the Bronx.
Yeah.
So that kind of ties in together. But we would travel for miles, and there was one guy, Tropical Paradise in Pennsylvania. He had the exclusive license to bring in acroporas, and he was the only shop in all of the United States to bring them in.
Wow.
So we would visit him every single weekend.
Do you know what country they were coming from? Was it Fiji back then, or?
No, Philippines. No, not Philippines. Indonesia.
Right, so it wasn't.
Only Indonesia. There was no Australian corals coming in back then. So he would bring them in, and Greg Scheimer, a dear close friend of mine who passed away way too early. I honestly think he was the most brilliant aquarist on the planet. And I miss him dearly because he was the one that would critique me. I would take pictures and I thought they would be amazing, and he would tell me they were garbage. And I walk away and I say, he's jealous. He doesn't want me to succeed. And then, as I kept getting better, because now he's egging me on, right? I can't take pictures. I'm going to prove to him that I can take pictures. So
and this is pre-digital camera. This is film, yeah?
Oh, yeah. This was actually slide film that then...
So you didn't even know what you'd shot until you had it developed?
Until you had... No. And that's the thing, right? We're so accustomed today that we take a picture and we see it right away. Back then, you had to wait till you went through the roll. And the roll, I would buy Fiji Velveeta film. And it was slide, because regular Kodak to paper was horrible, but you get a great contrast with the slides. So I would take pictures in slide format. I would wait for them to be developed. And then you find out of 36 pictures, 5 are good and the rest are garbage.
Yeah.
Not like today, right? You take a picture and you go, oh, this isn't good. And you delete it right away, to make room for more things. Back then, it was just...
Okay, so we're gonna fast forward a bit. So how did a guy from the Bronx end up opening a store in Qatar? You live in Qatar.
Yes, I live in Qatar now. And
how did that come about?
Well, what happened was my professional life, I was the corporate financial controller for Ford Motor Company. So I worked in Ford stores throughout the U.S. and I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. And then Ford reached out to me and said, hey, we have a possibility overseas. Do you want it? And I thought, international experience. So I decided, yeah, sure. So then a month later, I got a phone call from a colleague who moved to Qatar, but I didn't know that yet. And he says to me, hey, would you like to come to Qatar and be the corporate controller? And I said, oh, wow, that's 2 job offers. He says, no, it's the first one. It's the first one. They gave us 3 names. I saw your name. Would you come? And I said, you know what? It's the richest country per capita, which is obviously deceiving, just so you know. I said, sure, why not? Right? But it's easy to grab 250,000 people and make them rich. And then the rest of the population is poor, right? So richest per capita is because they're just Qataris. Anyway, I went, I did the accounting, and then I came back to the States. I was there for 8 years. And a Qatari called me up and said, did you live in Qatar? And I said, yeah. And he said, I want to set up a shop. And I said, only if you come visit me and I show you what we're going to do. Because the shops in Qatar are basically 1990s.
That's what I was going to ask you. What's the scene like out there?
Oh, it's bad. It's really, really bad.
Do many people keep saltwater or aquariums in
No,
general?
there's a lot of saltwater tanks. However, they don't do things right because they just don't know. If you don't know, you work around it. But I come in with the knowledge, and there's not even bulkheads in Qatar. No bulkheads. As simple as a product of a bulkhead, you can't find it in Qatar. We import it. The same thing with stands. We don't use iron or steel stands. We bring in the aluminum and we build aluminum stands, because when you look at all the stands from other quotations that I've done, they're all rusting, falling apart. Yeah. So we brought the new technology to Qatar that wasn't there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the name of your store, Tony?
Blue Marine Life.
Okay. Let's just talk about your book if we can, because every time you come down to the UK in Paul's store, we talk about your second volume now, and that's the Coral Reef Aquarium Volume 2, which I think Paul sells.
Yes.
Can you
Paul,
tell
you
us?
still sell it, right? Do you keep it in stock, or it sells too fast? Okay, good, because I've got some people from the rest of Europe looking for the book, and I'll just send them your way.
Can you tell us a bit about the two books?
Well, okay, so volume 1 was I went to Home Depot and I saw all these how-to-do books at Home Depot. And I realized that we didn't have a book like that in the aquarium trade, especially for reef keeping. And I brought it to the attention of Julian and another publisher,
Julian Sprung.
And Julian said, I'm really interested. He says, do a concept. So I did a concept of the book and I gave it to both publishers. One publisher told me, do all the writing, give me all the images, and I'll take care of the rest. And Julian said to me, it's your book, you do what you want. So guess where I went? I like to do what I want. So that's exactly what I did. I created the book. I had someone help me. I asked Julian, what software do we use? I learned the software, big learning curve there. And I put the book together and Julian dissected it. And
so what's in it? Is it a how-to and featured aquariums, or is it a...
Well, it's a book on... Volume 1 took me 4 years to do. And, I really concentrated very hard in volume 1 because, again, it's the first book and I wanted it to be perfect, even though things are just not perfect. But what I wanted to focus on was 4 different builds from a small system to a large system. So we went from a nano tank to a 20,000 gallon reef aquarium, Joe
Is this the first one?
in the volume 1,
Yeah.
yes. And I decided I wanted to showcase how these tanks were built and how they look down the road. So I did 4 builds, and then I wanted a chapter since, arguably, I have to say that I've probably seen more reef tanks because I've traveled so much, that there are people that aren't on the internet at all, no presence.
Yeah. Private
I've
individuals.
seen their beautiful tanks, and their tanks really needed to be seen. People need to know how they became successful. So I did the chapter Reef Tanks from Around the World, which allow you to see all these beautiful different tanks from all around the world, different countries. And back then, what's interesting, that was the book I published in 2011. There wasn't one tank from Australia worth being in the book.
Right.
And they have the Great Barrier Reef in their backyard. And they really didn't. So I showcase tanks so that way, if you saw a tank in that chapter, you would look at it and say, oh, wow, this is what I want my tank to resemble.
Yeah.
And the recipe was there.
Inspiration and how to achieve it. That's my favorite type of fish book, because I want to see the tank, think, That's the one I want. And then I want all the stats, the lighting, the pumps, the filtration method. Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's the best bit. And I think that's what we miss on the internet, especially Instagram. It's just, you scroll through and it's just super, super sexy tanks, but it doesn't give you the information. That's what we miss. And it doesn't give you, the names of the fish and the corals.
Well, I mean, there's Reef to Reef for that, right? You can go into Reef to Reef and see the guys build, but that's ages, right? It just takes so long, and then someone will start a build, and then you're interested in it, and then they stop the build,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, this is worse than dating, right? So it's like, okay, I don't want to deal with this. So now the Instagram is the big thing because it's instant gratification, right? But you don't get the detail. So that's where a guy like me comes into the detail, because I visit, now I have the YouTube channel, Vargas Reef Chronicles, and I go and I visit the hobbyists. We have coffee in front of their tank, discuss their tank and all their trials and tribulations to the successful tank. So I'm traveling now to do a lot of that. So in England, I've got four episodes to do, right, Paul? You're one of them? Say yes. Okay. So I've got 4 that I'm doing here, and then I fly to Germany, and I got 3 more tanks to see there. So what happens is, like for volume 2, I'll give you guys an example. There's a guy who has no presence. This gentleman doesn't even have an email address. So you know how we communicated? By mail.
Wow.
So he would send...
Old school.
Yeah. So I said to him, I need these 21 questions answered. I send him the thing. I have to wait for him to reply and send it to me. I get it and I go, oh, I can't decipher this. How can I even understand it? So I took it and I sent it to a friend of mine who lives in the Netherlands. He explained it to me. He reached out to him, went to his house, wrote all the information down and got it to the book. So for those that say, oh, well, you can see some of these tanks. No, these tanks, what you're seeing in the book, you will rarely ever see it anywhere else.
So is this for volume 2 or a potential volume 3?
Yeah, volume 2.
Okay.
No, volume 3 will not have as many tanks. Like volume 1 had, I think, 45 tanks, and volume 2 had about 39, 40. Volume 3 will only have 5 or 6.
Right, Tony, out of all the tanks that you visited throughout the decades around the world, which is your favourite? Let's put you on the spot, Tony.
It's
Bearing in mind who's in the room.
Yeah. No pressure.
Yeah.
oh,
Come on. Is there a top 3? A top 5?
Yeah, let's do.
What were the standout tanks?
Let's do a top 3. And I would have to say that top 3, 2 gentlemen are sitting here in the front. And I would say David Saxby's tank is just mind-blowing. The chapter that I wrote on Martin's tank, Martin, yours was the
Martin
highlight
Latham.
of the book, because the whole storyline of your tank was monumental. He sends his wife on vacation and he tears the house apart to build the tank before she gets back.
That made it to a national newspaper. Yeah.
It was in the Sun paper.
Yeah, I think they over-egged it a bit, didn't they,
Yeah.
Martin? But yeah.
Now, what's interesting is Julian Sprung is my publisher.
Yes.
So what I did was, as I did the chapters, I would send it to him. I sent him the chapter on Martin, and within 20 minutes, he's on the phone. Are you kidding me? And I said, you don't like it? He goes, keep bringing me stuff like this, because this is amazing. His story was just amazing. And
Yeah.
meanwhile, he has a beautiful tank. David, as well, has a phenomenal tank. And I was here like, what, Paul, would you say 8 or 9 months ago?
It's actually about exactly a year now.
Yeah.
Really, a year.
And
Oh, for your birthday celebration, the AAC birthday. Yeah.
and I remember seeing his tank a year ago, and I come in today.
Yeah.
Well, what, 2 days ago? And I said, David, you need to put a jackhammer to this tank. I mean, it is just,
Yeah.
the fish have no room to swim. The corals
Yeah.
are taking over. It's amazing.
It is truly reef building, isn't it? It's corals on top of corals on
Yeah,
top of corals.
It's
He's
but you know
building
what?
live rock.
But you know what? To be honest with you, I do a lot of scuba diving.
Yeah.
Not as much recently, but I can tell you what he has going on in his tank is actually what happens in the ocean. You go to a reef and the corals are competing against one another for real estate.
Yeah.
And the one that's stronger will overpower. So so those two tanks are like amazing and very memorable. The other one is an Italian tank. The name of the shop is called Sea Box,
Sea box.
and they're in volume 2 of the book. And this tank was 3.5 meters long, 2 meters wide, 80 centis high, and lit up with only T5s. And the water, you would think the way you look through the tank that there was no water in the tank. The water was crystal clear.
What's the secret?
Well,
Was
he
it the
owns
methodology or?
He owns the shop and he has somebody working on the tank every single day.
Okay. What was in
So-
it? Acros or?
It was it was a mixed reef, but it was very well designed, very well done, and I found that to be probably the nicest tank in the world. I mean, you know, it was beautiful. Absolutely
Italian
stunning.
style.
Huh?
Italian style. They've got that flair.
Yeah. Well, you know the Italians, right? They're good for architecture, food, and style. Right? They have style. Look at their suits, right? It's amazing. So yes.
So how do you rate our British tanks then? Obviously those two are exceptional. How do you rank us in the world of reefing, Tony? Come
I
on.
know I rank you guys up there, and I'll tell you why. Because when you walk in AAC, you are given an example of what you can achieve. And when you see the display tanks in AAC,
Yep.
they're exceptional. Exceptional. Those tanks are what you want in your house. So when you walk in there, you're going to say, hey, Paul, this is what I want in my living room. This is what I want in my den, right? Or this is what I want in my kitchen. Why? Because that shop is just mind-blowing, and everyone that shops in there wants to replicate those tanks.
Yeah. It's that inspiration again, isn't it? That's how it should be.
It should be. It's absolutely how it should be. You should walk into a shop and say, this is what I want at home.
Yeah.
Not walk into the shop and go, oh my God, look at that fish. Oh my God, look at that coral. Oh my God, where's all that? Why can I barely see through the water? And there's shops like that. We all know it. But having a shop like AAC setting the example for the hobbyists, and I'll tell you right now, when I first arrived, I was picked up by Dan. Dan, where are you?
Where's Dan?
That young man's tank was mind-blowing. Absolutely spectacular. So you'll be able to see it in a Vargas Reef Chronicle video within the next probably 30 days. And his tank is spectacular. So I'd say that right now, the English market and the English hobbyists, you guys are up there. You guys are up there. You know, America is known for grabbing a coral, naming it, and having a ton of frags in a fish tank. No, that's not the way it should be. It should be what Paul is demonstrating, what Dan is demonstrating, what David and Martin are demonstrating. Let the corals grow. Let it look like a real reef aquarium or a real reef scene.
You're not just into corals. I know you're into fish. So should we talk about some
Speaking
fish?
of reef scenes, yeah.
Whose tank is this?
That's mine.
Current or previous?
No, that's previous.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what? I don't know if you can crane your neck around there, Tony.
Yeah,
but
you can see a ton of wrasses. I'm a wrasse freak and a angel. Well, Ginacanthus semifasciatus.
Yep.
That's my number one angelfish in the whole world. It's a planktivore and it doesn't pick on corals. So, I don't like fish that pick on corals because I love to see polyp extension. If you have a lot of angels, you're not going to have as much polyp extension as someone who doesn't. So I love keeping wrasses and the Ginacanthus semifasciatus.
And Goniopora, that's a coral that's changed in the decades.
Now, that Goniopora brings a story. That Goniopora came the size of half a golf ball. And I got it from a company called ORA. And ORA was breeding them. And I went there and I said, oh, that's cute. And I put it in the tank. And a year later, it was the size of a soccer ball.
What's the
Or
secret?
a soccer ball, football.
What's the secret, Tony?
Flow. I didn't do anything different for this coral than I did for my SPS corals. Nothing different. But what I do find is that if you flow them back and forth instead of one direction, they seem to love it. And this thing grew and it molded onto the rock that it was growing on.
Was that a male swallowtail I saw? Was it a Japanese or a masked?
So
Genicanthus?
there's the males and the females in there. So in this scene, you don't have
I
any.
can see a pencil wrasse.
Yeah, you see.
That's is that a female?
Pseudogeloides.
Yeah.
I have leopard wrasses. There's the male. That's the male Ginacanthus, and that's the female behind him. If I have time, do I have time?
Yeah.
Give a quick little story.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Okay, so I wanted to do an experiment, so I reached out to my friend Barnett in the Philippines, who exports fish.
So this is Barnett Shutman from RVS Fish World.
Yes. So I reached out to him 10 years ago, and I said, I want to do an experiment. Send me 3 females, Ginacanthus semifasciatus. I don't want any males. And I want to see how long it would take for the dominant female, to develop and turn into a male. And I'm into the experiment a month and a half. And the largest female is starting to get a black line on her dorsal fin. So she's starting to convert. I get a phone call from Barnett. Tony, I got a male. And I thought of you only because this is the most super male we ever got. No, Barnett, I'm not interested. Click. Day later, Tony, I'm holding this male for you, and you need to have it. No, Barnett, the experiment is going well. I'm documenting everything. I don't want it. Click. 2 days later, Tony, you have to see this male. And I said, all right, send me a picture. He sends me a picture. I said, the experiment is over. Send me the mail. Send me the mail. So when I put the male in the system with the 3 females and the female that's starting to turn, the female comes up to the male and bumps him. And, like you could see his expression. He looked at her like, oh, please. And he kept swimming. And she came up to him again and bumped him, and he ripped her apart. A month later, that pair, that was his number one spawning partner. He spawned with all 3 females, but that was his number one. She started turning back into a female. She turned back 100% female, and she started getting fat, and boom, they were spawning. So the experiment was over, but that forever will be my favorite fish of all time.
Very cool. Very cool. We're nearly out of time for you, Tony. Has anyone got any questions for Tony quickly? We're going to have a Q&A, an extensive one this afternoon, but has anyone got any quick questions for Tony before we go to Jamie?
All right, Jamie's turn. Take over, Jamie. You're the man right now.
Thank you.
By the way, people, I want you to realize that this man is doing something illegal. He is.
What?
Because if you put online people having sex, they'll shut you down. This guy shows corals having sex. Take it away, Jamie.
So, Jamie, thanks for coming. You are, I'll tell you what, I work in the reef builders realm 5 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. And my American colleagues, your name comes up more times than anyone else. Jamie Craggs is mentioned to me 20 times a day. They idolise you over there. You are our greatest British export in terms of what you do. And you can't underestimate, the impact that you've had on global, coral spawning. You pioneered it. And now people talk about coral spawning every day. And it all traces back to you. So that is quite amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
So when did you start that then? So what's your journey? How did this all come about?
I mean, a bit like Tony, I started when I was probably about 7 or 8.
Yep.
Collecting frog spawn out of the local pond
Yeah.
and trying to rear that, and then got into freshwater fish. Had my first freshwater fish tank at about 11, about that sort of time, and was breeding a lot of anabantoids. So,
Okay.
gouramis and fighter fish and stuff. I'm an Essex boy as well. I may not sound like Paul, but I am an Essex boy. I grew up on the coast in Brightlingsea. So I kind of either lived on or in the sea all my life. And I kind of moved away from the hobby for a few years. I was into windsurfing a lot. Got back into fish keeping.
What sort of age was this then? Sorry.
So probably 16 to 19. I was just windsurfing all the time. I didn't do very well at school, but I was pretty good at windsurfing. I eventually got into uni down in Plymouth and started fish keeping again, much to my flatmates' annoyance, because our electricity bill was through the roof. They always would sort of laugh and joke that they would come and bathe in the multiple tanks that were in the house at the time.
And so what did you study at uni? Was there a pathway to this? Was this biology or?
Yeah, marine biology with ecology. And, I went through clearing process because, I wasn't very good at school. But I was lucky I got into uni and kind of everything kind of, the stars aligned when I got there. I really kind of found my calling. I started, keeping freshwater fish again, breeding freshwater fish while I was at uni and selling those for credit at the local shops. And then I started my first marine tank after uni. So it was about 98.
Yep.
It was horrible.
Yeah.
But I had an under gravel filter, which I later found out was actually invented at the Horniman.
Wow.
We've got a journal from about 1920, I think.
Yeah.
That described the under gravel filter. So it literally was invented at the Horniman Museum. And then after uni, did a little bit of, I paid to go out on an expedition out in the Philippines for 3 months and learn about coral reef ecology, and then started London Aquarium. I was keeping all the coral tanks at London Aquarium from 99.
Okay.
And then eventually moved over to the Horniman as a curator about 16 years ago now.
Okay. Wow. That's quite a long time. And just there's a bit of a tie-in with Tony in Qatar because you've just come back from Qatar and you literally missed each other on the flights.
Yeah. My battery actually ran out of my phone and I saw that you were in the airport literally at the same time.
You were hiding from him, weren't
I
you?
think we may
You were
have
hiding from him, Jamie. You were behind a bin waiting for him to go past.
But yeah, I've just come back working with Qatar University. It was a big coral spawning program we've been running for about 3 years out there.
Okay.
And it's been, the most successful trip so far. So we reared about 3 million larvae.
Wow.
They had 18 colonies spawn yesterday. I've just had a message. They've had more spawning today. So,
And are these corals that are native to their seas?
Yep.
So what's this? The
hottest ocean on the earth. So, we're focusing on 5 species. So this latest spawn was with Dipsastrius, the old Favias.
And to what sea is this, sorry?
The Arabian Gulf.
Yeah, Arabian Gulf.
Yeah. So the idea is, within the genetic code of those individuals is hopefully some answer about, what drives thermal resilience in our oceans.
Okay.
So, and if we can learn from that, can that be applied to other restoration work, really? And the whole project is about reef restoration, but focusing on ex situ spawning to generate material to rebuild reefs there. So, it's really cool.
Okay, so let's talk about the coral spawning lab because that is kind of your baby, presumably. This is, you started it.
Yeah, I mean, just reversing that back, it all started at the Horniman. So, I took over as curator there 16 years ago, and in the UK, you have something called a zoo license. So all zoos, aquariums have to, they have inspections to make sure there's certain standards that are met, and that allows you to have a license so that you can have members of the public in. Part of that is we have to be doing health and safety, welfare management, but conservation research, education are really big drivers within that. And the museum, sort of 3 or 4 years, well, probably even 5 years before me starting, had done basically nothing on conservation or research. And so they had a bit of a, knuckles rap saying you really need to focus on lifting that part of working with the collection. So it gave me the mandate to say, right, we really need to focus on research. It's always been my driving force of working within the aquarium is we should be, if we can look after our animals to the best ability, they often will breed. If they breed, then it opens up a whole world of opportunity to look at research and then also how that research then supports in situ conservation. And so, I've worked with corals my whole career, 25 years in public aquariums. And so I really steered the Horniman that we would focus very heavily on research behind the scenes. We were doing a lot of jellyfish work, breeding jellyfish. So I think we've bred like 14 species, and really they're the cousins of corals, right?
Yeah.
So we were doing work with Southampton Uni, looking at the seasonal change that triggers jellyfish production. And I basically just applied all that we were learning in the jellyfish and flipped over to corals to say, well, why are they any different? And so all of this coral spawning started with jellyfish as the sort of example. And then a tweet came out from Fiji. There was a dive company saying, oh, well, if you come out diving in 3 days' time, you'll come and see the spawning. And that was like, that to me was the moment I kind of started figuring it out. Well, if they're spawning then, they must know something about all those environmental parameters. So that gives a date that we can work on, look back at what's happening in the ocean in Fiji. And if we applied that to an aquarium system, then would they spawn? And that's what started Project Coral. So 2012, we built systems, very rudimentary. It was off the, building materials, bits of wood, and, it looked an absolute mess. But lo and behold, we got 2 corals, 2 acroporas, and we got them to spawn in 8 months. So we kind of knew we were onto something there, and the whole thing kind of grew.
So
from there.
what were the triggers to make them spawn? Is this because I've seen these blackout systems?
Yep.
Is it moonlight? Is it temperature? How did you?
So the original thinking was the first that every species has species specific drivers. So they have to hit a certain age to become sexually mature. And the thinking at the time was they had to hit a certain size.
Yeah.
We don't actually think that is the case now. I think it's more polyp age that drives it. So, if you've got a coral, you've got to get it to an age.
Okay.
And so most acroporas hit reproduction about 3 years old from settlement. Once they have hit that age, you have to feed them. So they acquire a lot of their energy from zooxanthellae, but they're also voracious predators. Corals can eat everything from bacteria, obviously absorb nutrients out of the water, bacteria, right the way up to big prey items. So if you've got a coral that's the right age, you're feeding it, and then the seasonal temperature change is the thing that triggers it to produce the eggs to start with. And the current theory is that these parameters work at a progressively finer scale to trigger them to release at this exact moment. So once the temperature's coming out of winter and climbing into the summer, the eggs are maturing inside the coral. And it depends on the coral species. So we've done a lot of histology that corals acroporas can take up to 10 months for the eggs to develop. Wow. Whereas something like a galaxia, it's maybe 3 months. So it's quite quick. So once you got this temperature rise, then it's the interplay between how long the day length is, and then the interplay between the lunar cycles. So the lunar cycle is the thing that allows us to pinpoint, broadly, it's not the exact day, but certainly a window of time. So, and the theory with the lunar cycle is as the sun has set and the moon is rising, you have a period of absolute darkness. And And so, sometimes we can be in the middle of the day and see the moon up, right? So we have to replicate those phases of the moon because the corals are tuned in to the absolute period of darkness between sunset and moon rising. And that extends by approximately 48 minutes each day. And so the corals inside them have something called cryptochromes, which are light sensitive cells, and they are picking up on that absolute darkness cue. So we figured this out over time, that these blackout blinds are allowing us to control that light dark environment. Yeah. Without that, they will still spawn, and they spawn in my kitchen. I put the blackout blind for the first few years in the kitchen, and then that doesn't go up anymore.
I think we featured your kitchen tank on this roll. It'll come back round. So
they will still spawn without that period of darkness, but the period of darkness allows them to synchronize. So if you don't give them that darkness period, the spawning can be a bit erratic. If it's erratic, you may have 10 individuals, right? They all have to go on the same night. So all the acroporas are hermaphrodites. They're releasing eggs and sperm, but they can't self-fertilize. So this is actually the fertilization going on right now. So these are the sperm cells going into the egg, right? So we need to get eggs and sperm released, these packages of multiple colonies, to open up all the research. If they go on different nights, it's wasted. It's anthea food. So by blacking out and then controlling that light dark environment provides the access.
And what I like about it is that this wasn't it is a lab and it is science, but you were using readily available aquarium equipment. Lighting, pumps, tanks, salt, everything.
Everything. The advancement that has happened in our industry, and none of this would be possible without that advancement and the likes of all the companies you got listed here. So this is accessible to everyone. It's amazingly powerful, the kit that we have access to now. This was a dream that I wanted to do at London Aquarium 20 years ago, and we couldn't do it because we didn't have the Apex. The early stages we used GHL. I had a volunteer who was a computer program, and he hacked into the back of the GHL and wrote code.
Wow.
And then, ultimately the whole project was dependent on his ability. He then stopped volunteering for us. And that's when we swapped over to Apex because the user interface is brilliant on it.
So what's the Apex doing? What's it controlling?
So on the Apex, you can program the seasonality. So there's the seasonal tables, you put in the temperature profiles. And so you put in and wherever you want to replicate in the world. Okay, so say you're going to do Indonesia, Australia, wherever that might be, Qatar, where we just come back from. You first put in, you have to have access to what the temperature is doing in the ocean. There's loads of data sets. Some of them are scientific. You can literally download data in real time coming from buoys, or you can go on things like surf reports. And use that general trend of what the temperature is doing in that ocean. So in the seasonal table, on the first of each month, you put down what the temperature should be, and the Apex then just incrementally works it out between the 1st of Jan, 1st of Feb, and it will control your pumps and your chillers, and you'll follow that trend. You can do the same with the photo period. Just go on timeanddate.com. You can put a pin any place on the planet, and then do the same thing.
And so were LED aquarium lights an integral part of this development, or could you do it with a metal halide? Isn't it moonlight related, did you say? Or?
Yeah, so the early stages, we were doing it with T5, so on, off. And you can spawn corals like that. I think the ability with the LEDs is we can do things like solar radiation curves. So if we imagine directly on the equator, you have no variation in the day length. It's 12-12 when it's bang on the equator. And there's some research done on rubber plantations in plants. The trigger that gets rubber plants to flower is different on the equator than it is when you move north and south of the equator. If you move north and south, the plants are very much driven by the photoperiod change. When they're bang on the equator, they're triggered by something called solar radiation. And it's to do with the elliptical movement of the sun around, or the earth around the sun. The sun is closest to the earth at 2 points of the year, at the spring equinox and the autumn equinox. And when you look at the equator and you plot out the solar radiation curve, you get a big peak in spring and then you get a secondary peak in autumn, and the rubber plants are tuned into this. And we think this is playing some role with the corals as well, but definitely, I mean, we ran an experiment. Matt is in the audience here, and we ran an experiment for 3.5 years trying to disentangle the role of light dynamics over temperature profiles. But it's all done through hobbyist grade kit.
Wow. And this is good timing you appearing now, because the corals were spawning in Indonesia last week.
Yep.
So are they still spawning now? Is it a short period or?
So Indonesia is an interesting one. There's not a lot of information known. Vincent Chalias has been posting stuff out recently. I've been talking with him a lot over the last few years. And whenever you're working in an area, that's the first thing you have to do is understand what the pattern is. So again, Matt's here. Matt and I have spent the last 3 years working in the Maldives, training a team up out there and how to determine when a species is going to spawn. That work, rather than Australia that has this sort of peak in November, December, that work we've now discovered that Maldives has 8 months of spawning. So different species are going at different times of the year. And that is gold dust for reef restoration. It means that you're not just having to concentrate all your effort in a 1 month or 2 month period. You've got 8 bites of the cherry to be able to work with it, just as long as you understand different seasons. Indonesia, through Vincent's work, we're slowly starting to understand that seasonality. I think it will be a little bit spread out in Indo.
What I like about what you've done, though, part of your kind of hack, once you'd learned how to spawn them, is that you can now manipulate these triggers. And the last time you gave a talk here at Paul's other event, you said how, in the ocean, it's at night, it's a problem, you don't know when it's going to be. And you've brought in such controls now that you can get them to spawn in the day instead of at night, in your home instead of in the ocean, and even not at the weekend, because you don't want to work the weekend, you can have it in the week.
Yeah. It's got, the control is amazing. I mean, when we first started with this, I was still using my in situ mentality. So I've been lucky to be in the ocean and seeing spawning. We brought corals back from Singapore, and I was still using that thought process that we had to have, the lighting up during the day so we could service the tanks, and then we would have to work all night to capture the spawn. So we got special government permits to bring 15 colonies back from Singapore in 2015. And we specifically collected those in February because the spawning's normally March, April. We have to be at work at 8 a.m. to run a public aquarium. We were then staying late to try and monitor when the spawning was happening. And we'd done this for about 10, 12 nights in a row, finishing work at like midnight, going back home, a couple of hours kit, back in at 8. We were absolutely wrecked. And we'd gone past the window when they were spawning in the day out in Singapore. So colleagues in Singapore were in the ocean going, it's gone tonight, it's gone. Yeah. And we were like, nothing's going. We were thinking, well, okay, maybe they're delayed and they're going to go the next month. So I think after 12 nights of observations, we stopped. We actually basically missed the spawn that year. The night that we stopped, they all went. So we missed the whole lot. I mean, this was a 10-month process of getting these corals in. We missed it, then had to wait 12 months to have another crack at the cherry. But it was, I wasn't very good at work being around when we found out that we missed it. I was a bit annoyed. But it was the most important learning curve. I mean, you learn so much from your failures to say, well, why are we doing it like this? We've got all this control. Let's just flip the whole thing on its head, make it spawn in the day. So now, if you follow Ashley on Instagram, all the blackout blinds have just started going up at the Horniman. We generally will keep them in their normal lighting for about 10 months of the year. Then a month before spawning, we'll flip the cycle. So, and we don't acclimate that in. It's literally just go into the apex, change it so it's 8 hours difference. And so the one day they've just got a super short day and they flip onto that cycle very quickly. We generally do it about 4 weeks before the spawn. But Qatar, we were so rushed at the start of this project, we did it a week before and they still moved. So again, we're learning so much about that plasticity of the spawning. Then we started taking that a step further with this experiment that I say Matt and I were doing for 3.5 years. We then started looking at, well, if we know a species spawns in November, how about we move it and go, well, let's make it spawn in June or whatever. So the theory is if you have 12 systems in the year, 12 systems, you could phase shift and have 12 spawns a year. That increases your access to material. You can do more, whatever you want to do with that material. And so really the start of the Coral Spawning Lab was Mike was asked to go and present out in at Cal's University. They do something called CRISPR-Cas9. So this is gene editing work. So when you are trying to understand what genes are responsible for a trait, what you have to do is either turn off that gene and rear the animal and see what that gene has done, or you can snip out a gene and put a new gene in. And the way you do that is you do it at the point of fertilization. So you inject the egg, you snip out the gene, and then you do the fertilizations, and that's CRISPR-Cas9. To do that, you obviously need access to the eggs. And if you've got literally just one spawn a year, you're trying to relearn that technique, and the progress is super slow. So they basically wanted multiple spawns a year. They asked for 24. We ended up designing a system. In the first year, they had 96 spawning events.
Wow.
So it just exploded their research potential. And it's given us a massive amount of control over what we can now do.
So, you know, we're all kind of hanging our hopes on you as kind of saving the oceans. What?
No pressure.
So, how under threat are natural coral reefs? The last time you were here a year ago, I think there was another heat wave, and you were like, "This is bad. This is really bad." And you had the data from NOAA, I think. And are they getting more frequent? Are they getting more severe? Can you tell us about that?
It doesn't look good. It really doesn't. I got invited out to Bonaire earlier this year, and I think the Caribbean is unfortunately showing us what's coming down the line for the rest of the world's oceans. It's pretty apocalyptic. I mean, Bonaire, it's the first time I dived there. There's been a disease called Skittle D. It's affecting all massive corals in the Caribbean. So not only are they having this bleaching as a result of thermal stress, but they're also getting this rapid disease that's spread. And in Bonaire, you know, you go below 8 meters and it's almost 100% mortality. It is
below 8 meters, not shallower.
Bizarrely, with Skittle D, and they don't understand what's going on here. The deeper, from 8 meters down, the disease has completely ravaged the reef. Between the sort of 8 and 5 meter, it's there, but it seems to be checked. I was having a discussion with a researcher last week about that, and they think that the disease is affecting the zooxanthellae and ultimately the clade of zooxanthellae that is present in the coral at depth is more susceptible. But this disease wasn't in that region 2 years ago. So it's literally wiped out the reef in that speed of time. It's a depressing story. It really is. And you look at the IPCC reports, and if we hit 1.5 degrees, then, you know, 70% of the world's reefs are affected. We're not going to hit 1.5. You know, we're not even going to stop at probably 2.5. So this is coming down the line, and it will have a big impact on the hobby. Because I would say we've got 10 years of actually getting corals from the ocean coming into the trade. That's my prediction.
Okay. And so, but then we'd think, well, we're okay. We've got Jamie. Jamie can save us. But you took quite a pragmatic kind of approach to it the last time we spoke, and you were like, you know, the Great Barrier Reef is this big. I mean, what impact can your work have? I mean, if someone said, repopulate this reef for us, Jamie, what can you do?
So there was a task force meeting out in Saudi last year in January where they brought people in all over the world, and a guy called Carlos Duarte is one of the main researchers in CAUS, and he sort of got up and presented about the impact the restoration is happening to date. And when you tot the global restoration footprint that's happened, it's something like 0.0001% coverage so far. So it's basically nothing. And to protect 30% of the world's reefs, which is the goal by 2030, we need to be producing billions of corals. And we're nowhere near at a scale of that scale yet. There's amazing work going on around the world. Restoration will not save the reefs. It will give, hopefully, some little pockets that provide glimmers of hope. I think that's, and I think everyone in restoration is not saying this is the solution. Things like biobanks, land-based biobanks play an important role, cryopreservation, restoration. How do you breed thermally tolerant corals? All of these tools have to come together to give reefs a future. There are places, though, that are showing resilience. Often they're reefs that are very turbid. They're not very sexy from a point of view of, the Great Barrier Reef is a classic example. The reefs directly off the coast, really murky, perhaps not as diverse as the Outer Barrier Reef, but no one dives it. They all blast out to go out to these sort of pristine-looking reefs.
Yeah.
Those pristine reefs just fall over as soon as the thermal stress event comes in. These more turbid reefs are actually pretty resilient. And we think a lot of that is because of feeding, heterotrophic feeding. So, that boosts up the thermal resilience. So these reefs will be the source populations that will hopefully then repopulate.
But are they not different genera of corals? Are they not,
Some, yes, but you do still get a spread across the regions.
So you've bred 50 coral species?
I think I'm kind of losing count. I think we're at 52, 53, something.
That's
like
amazing.
That. Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing. We tend to think of you as breeding hard corals. It occurred to me the other day, do you breed soft corals? Do you breed leathers? Do you breed GSP? I mean...
No, we haven't focused on that at all yet. We have been running a project for the last couple of years on the pink sea fans.
Tell us about that.
Off the UK coast. So we're trying now to apply this approach to British waters. So we've got a PhD student from Exeter University. She's been doing some great work looking at the genetic connectivity of the population. So the sort of Irish Sea is the northernmost range, and then it goes all the way around into the Mediterranean. So the previous PhD before her actually did the genetic relatedness. The missing part of that is to understand the spawning and how the larvae swim around to connect those up. And so the goal for the last couple of years has been to bring pink sea fans from Plymouth, and they've been following a pattern exactly the same way as the tropical corals, but for Plymouth waters. And we had our first spawning about a month ago.
And so this is a temperate gorgonian.
Temperate gorgonian.
Non-photosynthetic?
Non-photosynthetic, yeah. So Paul's been helping out, supplying the reef nutrition food.
So let's talk about that. So what are they feeding on?
So we have, again, tried to cover a broad range of food types. So we've designed a system, again, with the Apex taking control of it, where it has alternating tidal patterns going backwards and forwards. So there's a 6-hour tidal pattern, and we dose the food on the making tide. And the idea behind that is the polyp bends with the flow. And so that flow rate is critical to the feeding success. So the reason why you get them growing out in a laminar plane like that is the tidal patterns coming in that direction, then back in that direction. The polyp then bends and it creates a back eddy around the polyp, and that improves the feeding efficiency. Wow. So about 10 centimeter per second is the optimal flow. And so we dose the food in on that flow pattern, and we do everything from phytoplankton to oyster feast to newly hatched Artemia. Generally, newly hatched Artemia gets done every day, and then we'll alternate a different food each day as well.
And so tying all that back into, spawning acros, and obviously that's what myself and all these guys, we just think, wow, if we could spawn acros, and you said it's nutrition related as well. What's Jamie's secret sauce for feeding these corals to get them to spawn then?
So the secret sauce in my home. What stays in the home? No,
I'm saying nothing.
So we don't understand nutrition well enough yet, I think, in terms of the impacts of the impact that has on breeding. I think there's a lot of research that needs to be done. The caveat I do have is we have had spawning in our main coral displays at work and at home. I don't feed the corals at home or the main reef display. We broadcast feed the fish. The fish are excreting. The corals will be collecting some, and they still reproduce perfectly well. in terms of our research systems, we will isolate those every day for 2 hours, and we'll put a broadcast mix of various foods. Generally, most small frozen feeds, basically. So frozen rotifers, frozen cyclops, that type of thing. But we don't have like, this is the perfect ingredient. I think they probably would be spawning even without that, because I think they're getting a lot of nutrition for the zooxanthellae and then just the surplus food to the fish.
And is there any truth in that? Obviously, we know that Indonesian corals were spawning last week. Is there any truth in recently imported Indonesian corals being likely to spawn last week? If we bought them 3 weeks ago, are they just going to go for it?
Yeah, 100%. So the thing with Indonesia, the way that you buy the corals is they're farmed in the ocean, right? So a lot of them are quite small.
Yep.
If you bring in or buy from Paul Australian corals, and I think we should go over and break some of Paul's corals and have a look at eggs. And then someone can buy a gravid colony. Now is the time. If you buy an Australian coral, they will have eggs in.
Really?
Yeah.
Are they visible to the naked eye?
Yeah.
If you fragged it, if you
We'll
saw
do it, Paul, yeah?
Yeah.
Can we break some stuff?
Yeah.
Perfect. It's very easy. You break a branch off and you look through the cross section, right? Particularly when they're this close to spawning, they're going to start pigmenting. When they're white, you just need to get your eye in or have good eyesight. When they're pigmented, it's very easy to see. They're just little red dots in the cross section. So if anyone wants to spawn corals, probably the easiest thing to do is buy, 4 or 6 pieces. Generally, they have to be different individuals. So in Australia, because they're chopped off a much bigger individual, if you buy them this time of year, they'll have eggs in. You need to buy multiple individuals to allow you to do the fertilization.
Of the same species, they won't hybridize.
You can hybridize, but it's there's a lot more work.
Yeah, a whole nother subject.
Yeah, I've been chatting with Sanjay about it, and he's had some spawning recently. He's going to try and do hybridization, but you will find the success rate is about 1/10 of just working with a single species. Acropora ameliopora is the perfect starting acro to work with from Australia. If you get that, you'll have spawning probably around the 21st to the 26th of November.
Paul, have you got any Australian millies in?
The difficult one. I didn't send it. You know why I didn't get many millies? Because Mark.
Yeah, and we had a load as well. Sorry about that.
Most of the millies we get are Indo, aren't they?
Yeah.
Maricultured Indo.
And we've had... Well, if they're a bigger side, we can still break some level of...
Let's smash them up. Smash them up.
We'll have no stock left.
No, but I think the point is everyone who's got a mature tank will have spawning. Okay, the amount of time you've gone on a forum and someone say, "Oh, my urchin spawn and my snail spawn," it's probably not that. It's probably corals.
Wow.
So whenever you're taking a branch and giving it to a friend, just look through the cross section, and if you want to work with spawning, just get multiple individuals of the same species. Okay. And that's the starting point.
So we've only got a few minutes left with yourself before we talk again this afternoon. But so say a coral spawns in a home aquarium. Our setups, they're all very similar. So it floats to the surface, off down the weir, and it's gone.
Yep.
What's the...
So I don't know whether... As this goes through, there'll be a picture of something called setting. So with acroporas, you'll see these little dots along the branch. That's the egg sperm bundle coming up into the mouth of the coral. You have to turn the flow off in your tank, turn all your internal pumps off, just have a static body of water. Once that individual set, it is going to spawn. You just need to sit and wait for those packages to float up to the surface. And you'll see, I'll put a little video in there just skimming off the surface at home. I have a little side tank, and it literally is like, this big. And I just built buckets that I've cut little meshes out the windows. I put all the eggs in there and just allow the fertilization to take place.
How long does that take?
Fertilization, so the bundle breaks apart in about, depending on species, anywhere between half an hour to an hour and a half. We then leave the eggs and sperm together. I generally do that in a washing up bowl at home, or we do it in bowls at the museum down in the lab. You want to leave that 45 minutes for fertilization to take place. Best thing to do is to try and then wash the sperm away from the eggs. So you just mouth siphon and make sure you're good at mouth siphoning. You only get it
for that,
you get it wrong once. Let's put it like that. You get it wrong once, so you learn quick.
Oh, this hobby, I don't know.
And then you wash the eggs and then put them in these bowls. And then you've got 4 days for the embryos to develop and form the larvae. They then settle on whatever you want to put, like plugs or...
But settlement's the hard bit, isn't it?
Settlement's the hard bit. There's lots of bottlenecks of trying to maximize the the success. If you're using frag plugs, it's good to have the frag plugs in your tank for a month. Don't go too long, don't go too short. It needs to be a month. Get past that kind of green filamentous slimy stage, because we know that crustose coralline algae, CCA, is provides some of the bacteria associated with that are the triggers to settle the corals. And so you want the plugs to be a little bit conditioned, but also not too conditioned, because the algae will also smother them.
And just finally, you did. Let's talk about urchins, because part of your early kind of research, you thought, well, if I've got tiny coral larvae that need cleaning, let's make a tiny urchin.
Exactly. So it was one of the chaps from my PhD. Adult urchins will grind, the rock down to bare rock, right? They're really good at grazing everything that outcompetes the coral. So, but the problem is they'll also eat the baby coral. So we thought, well, we need to spawn the sea urchins to mix juvenile urchins with juvenile corals. So we started doing a lot of work on our phytoplankton culturing, which then allowed us to spawn the urchins. We had to rear those about 2 months before the coral spawning, and that gives enough time to get them through their pelagic phase, grow them out, and then introduce them. And it worked beautifully. We basically, the more urchins we put in, we got an 8-fold survival of the juvenile coral. So if you've got more coral, got more productivity, and then the urchins become a sort of byproduct. And then we started looking at this, if we then breed a different species of urchin that could be used in the human food industry, could you then create a secondary income for a restoration project?
Right.
So that you create more corals for restoration, but then you pay for the restoration by selling urchins. And so we got a grant. Hartley, who's my deputy at the Horniman, went out to Palau this year for 4 weeks and built an urchin spawning lab out in Palau. And we're going to be testing these over the next few years. Okay. With a view that, you're bringing... what drives us with this, there's loads of opportunity for the aquarium trade, but it's not my main driver. The thing that I want to do is look at how do we create income for people in reef nations that supports the reef, brings them away from destructive fishing techniques. There's lots of opportunity, I think, there. So, yeah.
That's brilliant. And thanks so much for that, Jamie. So those are our first 2 guests for this morning, Tony Vargas and Jamie Craggs. Let's have a round of applause, please.
Does anyone have any questions?
I'm going to do that. Tony.
I have one. Is this on?
Very quickly.
I have one question, Jamie. So you said that the coral has to be at least 3 to 4 years old so it can spawn. Now, let's face it, everyone out there has a frag of a frag of a frag of a frag of a frag that's probably 20 years old.
Yep.
Is the frag capable of spawning that it's 20 years old, or does that frag now have to wait 3 to 4 years?
No, the frag can... Is this working? Yeah, the frag absolutely can spawn. So my early work was corals that I got from David many years ago. I've known David, thankfully, for 25 years or something. And so I've got my original acroporas have come from David's tanks. Right. But yeah, absolutely. What we don't understand yet is senescence. So animals, will stop reproducing when they hit a certain age.
Menopause.
Yeah, basically. And corals will go through that exact same process. Work that we've been doing in Palau, looking at Acropora digitifera, it seems that Acropora digitifera is actually quite a fast and rapid growing and dying species.
Wow.
Whereas other species can live for decades and decades. So there will be differences with every coral.
So that brings into another question. Whereas a customer buys a coral he puts it in his tank, all the corals are doing well, and that coral dies. And basically the hobbyist says, what did I do wrong? And you're just saying now that it's possible that it's a lifespan.
It could be, yeah.
Yeah. And don't blame yourself.
I didn't know that. I thought some of these huge colonies that we find are centuries old.
Well, yeah, every species will have its own life history strategy. So some will be, yeah, absolutely centuries old. You know, the big, massive varieties and stuff like that are, you know, and lots of work has been done where they core them. And just like a tree, they create rings. And you can actually tell what the climate was doing looking at that ring. So species like that, yeah, they can live thousands of years. Wow. Whereas others, it's just their life history. They grow fast, die young.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jamie.
All right.
Thanks, Tony.
So there you have it. That is the first episode, episode 1 of Coral Freaks, an audience with. Stay tuned for episode 2, which will be dropping next weekend. And as always, there's plenty more seeing the fish.